Okay, I'm getting a little nod here from the organisers. So thank you all very much for coming along and joining us this afternoon. An exclusive audience. Some of you can't really see what's happening there, so if you want to pop across, feel free. And also do let us know. There have been some issues with the sound, so let us know if there's any problems with that. A big thank you to all of you for coming along. Thank you to Stockholm Masson and the organisers of the design talks, and of course to my panel, who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves. Three lovely ladies, lucky me. The design talks this afternoon, or this year, are themed Tales of Creativity, and we're looking very much at this here on today's session, Creative Dilemma Down at the Studio. Now, as a topic, this made me, from my sort of life as a journalist, think about some of the questions that I've asked when I've interviewed designers and creators over the years. For example, what inspires you? What are your sources of inspiration? And I always got the same sort of banal answer, which was everything. The birds, the bees, the life, the trees, whatever it might be, my travels, magazines. So I stopped sort of asking that question. But this is sort of what I'm looking at, how we can continue creativity within a studio. How can you keep that going? And secondly, I looked at the sort of the dichotomy of designers telling me, all we do is, every project we do is new and fresh and what have you, and I was saying, well, come on, you have a house style. People employ Zaha Hadid because she has a particular way of working, Karim Rashid for his particular style. So these are the sort of questions I think we're going to look at this afternoon and see how creative studios, can keep reinventing themselves and can be successful over a good number of years. I'd just like to make a small apology. Gert Vingard from Vingards, unfortunately, has been unable to make it, but I'm delighted to say that we have Malin Zimm from White Architecture has stepped in at the last minute, so thanks very much indeed, Malin, for that. But now I'd just like to, before we start with the topic, ask each of my panelists to just briefly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about the studio, where they work, and why they're here. So start with you, Tina, immediately on my right. Tina Norden.
My name is Tina Norden. I'm a project director at Conran and Partners in London. We are Terence Conran's architecture and design studio. You may be familiar with Terence's name. He's very famous in the UK as a person who started Habitat and really started bringing design to everybody. We're about an 80-head studio in London across all the design disciplines, and creativity and how to keep that going is very much something that we try and work with on a daily basis.
Now, we couldn't get Sir Terence along.
He's 83.
He's rather aged right now. But you've been working with him for 17 years.
17 years, that's right.
And really, you directly with him, I understand. Yes. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, one of his kind of key focuses has always been restaurants, as I'm sure you're aware. And I started as a young architect working with him on restaurant projects on a daily basis, and he was absolutely inspirational. Very, very challenging, as you can imagine, but absolutely inspirational as someone to mentor effectively young designers.
Okay. Johanna.
Yeah. My name is Johanna Munck of Rosenschöld. I'm the practice director of Tengboms Architects, which is the oldest architect office in Sweden. It was founded 1906.
By Mr. Ivar Tengboms,
By Mr.
I understand.
Ivar Tengboms.
Yes.
His grandson is still working with us. And we are a lot of interior architects. We're about 40. And apart from being the oldest, we have just been in the newspaper. Just to this week, there was an article on us that we were the hottest in the business, that we were hetast i branschen. So that's a great combination of being the oldest and the most interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Malin, maybe you have something to say about that from White Architecture.
Oh yes, we were in the same article, and sadly with only half the amount of interior architects. So we're the second hottest in the business. Tepid. No, let's say. So White Architects, where I am director of research and development. White Architects has been around. We're flying under the flag of Sid White, who founded the company in 1950.
In Gothenburg. Gothenburg?
In Gothenburg, yes.
Yeah.
Based in, with the first assignment was the big housing development in Örebro. So standing on the shoulders of giants, of planners, White Architects is now a curious collective acting on and producing knowledge since way over 50 years back.
And very interesting, research and development as a job specification within an architectural practice. I think that's quite interesting. Normally it's a scientific type thing or in technology.
It really has it touching on both sides of technology and more sort of science. It's also we do also stand on the leg of developing methodologies. Refining the processes of architecture, a bit of theory as well. Currently we have one professor in KTH, and we also...
Sorry, professor in?
In the Royal Institute of Technology we have an installed professorship, and also employed PhDs in both Chalmers and KTH. So there is this root and side of connections with academia in the company.
Okay, so we have hot, warm, and lovely, or something like that going on here. I talked earlier on about sources of inspiration and how every time I asked this question in the old days, I just got, oh, everything inspires me. But let's talk about how a studio can keep on being creative. Tina, do you want to pick that up? I mean, how do you creativity, tales of creativity, how do studios keep being creative?
I mean, I think one of the key ones is to make sure that there's fresh blood, because that's where creativity and new thought comes from.
But you've been there 17 years.
I've been there for 17 years, so I'm clearly not the fresh blood anymore. That's fine, I'll admit to that. But we very much kind of want to make sure that we've got young designers coming in straight out of colleges from all over the world, obviously a lot of them from the UK, but we have people from Spain, we have people from Greece, we have people from all over the place. And really kind of the design schools now is where fresh thinking is happening, and tapping into that and bringing those people in and giving them the ability to develop and to hone their skills, to teach them how to do things in the real world, but kind of working with them on developing their creative ideas is really what makes it exciting for us.
Okay. What about you, Johanna?
No, I couldn't agree more. When I took over the interior design studio, they were 8 people.
How long ago was that?
That was 5 years ago.
Okay.
We were 8, and now we are 40. And I think really looking to attract younger architects and to get a good mix between men and women, and also to have an open and free discussion within the office where everyone's idea is welcomed.
And are you able to attract international talent as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, given the situation in Europe, we receive a lot of applications from Spain, from Poland, from a lot of from outside the world as well. But
when you say situation in Europe, is that a good thing?
I think the situation for architects in Sweden in the recent years have been fantastic. We have a very, very low unemployment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
And whereas in Spain, for example, it's been very bad.
But are you getting the best people out of Spain, do you think, or just the guys who are desperate, who can't get a job in Spain?
No, I think, as always, when we interview people, you look at the portfolio, you talk to them. It's about a little bit what we are looking for at the moment, and definitely a lot of talent.
Okay. This morning we had a discussion looking at design schools and how they can develop creativity. And the main theme of that conversation was all about the design schools, like there's a lady from Beckham's, collaborating with industry. Now, you're sort of the industry. Are you collaborating with universities locally to attract talent, do internships or stages? Is that one way of developing creativity?
Well, of course, it's from the universities, from the schools that the talent and the creativity, they come from maybe a couple of workplaces, but the youngest ones are pretty much straight off the academic shelf, so to say. So of course we do have that kind of contact. I think also, if you would ask the question of how we sort of keep creativity, how we keep up at White Architects, you would get 700 and 40 answers, one from each employee, basically. Whereas I think...
Well, we heard Ilse talking a minute ago. You know, she doesn't want to have a committee, but 700 voices. You can't be running a business like that.
Well, surely the groupings, the creative groupings, is then.
We'll come on to that, I think, in a while about sort of how to run the process. But I'm talking here more about creativity. How do you keep being creative? Yes. So we've only touched one strand, really. Employ bright new minds.
Yeah.
What else is happening on a project? How can you deliver another housing project from the first one you had back in 1950? Someone gives you a housing project now. How are you making that different? How are you? What drives anybody?
I think an example from us is we have design reviews every week, which is open for everyone. We have landscape architects commenting on interior architecture. We have workshops led by...
And how does that physically work? Because we just heard there from Ilse Crawford, we don't want to have sort of the financial director saying, oh, the public aren't going to like that sort of design, are they? You know, landscape gardener, what's he, architect, what does he know about interiors?
I think he knows a lot. I think that
but it's like we all think we're good cooks, aren't we? I could have cooked that.
But I don't think we do design reviews as well. And I mean, in many ways, I don't think it's about being told what to do. What it's about is creative debate. So someone who's in a completely different context
and looking at
can
it
look at it and say,
exactly.
why isn't this blue? Or why aren't you doing that? And sometimes you just think, actually, I've never thought of that. You know, that's a really good way of approaching it.
I mean, an example we did, we have designed the Ernst & Young head office in Stockholm. And we couldn't really get the reception. It was just, it didn't fit. Something was wrong. And then there was this landscape architect, and he was like, well, why do you position the reception desk there? Why don't you have it there? Which would have meant that you get in and you have the reception desk behind you, which is a little bit a strange way. But it was so much more better for the space and for as the whole. So it was just a great example of mixing.
And that just shows how important this interdisciplinary constellation is. That it's a release of ideas once you start to open up between you.
And I think it's also important that it's not hierarchical. I think there's nothing kills creativity really than being told from above how you should be thinking, how you should be approaching things. And I think keeping an open debate where everybody's invited, whether you are straight out of college or whether you're a director, that you feel that your voice is heard and you can be part of the conversation. And it could be the year-out student who has the best idea. It doesn't actually really matter as long as it all pulls together to become a whole really.
Do you have time? Is that reality? Is that the reality how it works? I mean,
it is the reality.
You start listening to every single comment on something, you'll never get anything done.
Not every single comment. I mean, obviously, it's design reviews, like you were saying. That's specific forums for it. But it's also, when we work in a team, there might be 4 or 5 people working on a project. We have constant design debates. We, twice a week, 3 times a week, we have a design meeting, and then that's the forum when everybody who's working on the team can throw things into it, and then you open it up to the wider audience in the design reviews.
And I think time is usually a critical factor. I mean, you usually have a deadline at some point, and in some cases it has to be me that decides because you have to close somewhere. But I think the discussion that takes place before the decision is really the best and interesting part.
We really have different roles there because you are sort of guarding the deadlines, and I'm just sort of giving out time and possibilities from my horizon of from the research and development. We enable by adding hours to the projects to insert the research and development project within the project, so to say. So adding hours, but then...
But does it have to be a big project, or how do you find the time to...
We have examples of small product development within the project. One example is a door handle, which is very sort of particular and, forgive me for saying, hands-on project that is inserted within the healthcare, a bigger healthcare program, huge hospital design projects that White is working on. And that particular door handle, it solves problems on a sort of on the human scale, really, on the level of, a surgeon having cleaned your hands according to all sort of hygienic measurements, and then you have to get the door open. It sort of boils down to that kind of situation in architecture, which sort of reminds us about how important it is to get the research in on every level and scale. And then, of course, we have larger city planning projects. So it's sort of spanning that scale is really exciting to be able to grow and allow that kind of knowledge production.
So take an example of a city planning project. How are you being creative there? I mean, are you not sort of completely hemmed in by regulations and by the topography of the land or the river, these sorts of things? How does that work in a landscape, in a master planning type situation?
Oh, for instance,
being creative.
All surfaces in a city needs to do a kind of a job, actually, and they need to perform performative surfaces, just like the facade doubling as a solar panel that could then transform a whole building or the entire block into a kind of self-sufficient energy unit. That, of course, puts that particular block and solution in relation to the rest of the city. So let's just say someone else builds next to that block and covers the sun,
puts it into the shade.
So
all of a sudden
actually, it really doesn't end there. Then you would have to
but these sound very
to the
reactive
next level
measures.
of research, which is how do we actually get all the pieces of the puzzle in that scale together.
It sounds a bit reactive. I mean, surely creativity by its very nature is rather than reacting to something, you're creating something, you're generating something new and fresh.
Well, you've got to be careful with that. This is kind of my standard spiel when I talk to students at university. We're designers, we're not fine artists, and I think that's a very clear distinction for me. And it's a different type of creativity. Now, this may be controversial, I don't know, but for me, designers respond to problems. We're problem solvers effectively, and hopefully we can solve those problems in a creative way. So our creativity is applied to it in that manner, rather than kind of empty sheet of paper and you start from complete scratch. There is no such thing in design. There is always a client, there's always a site, there's always an issue or a brief that needs to be addressed. And that is really what our strength should be, that we can resolve those problems, issues, briefs, whatever you might want to call them.
Creativity being problem solving.
Yeah.
Was it you that sent me the little text saying that creativity is intelligence having fun?
Having fun.
I mean,
yeah, I love that one.
Creativity, intelligence having fun.
That's a great quote.
I liked it.
I think some humor and fun and joy is a big part of creativity, and on the other hand is anxiety and stress, and I mean it's really in between. And the creative process, I've become very fascinating about the cooking industry and the most extreme chefs, if you talk about El Bulli or Noma, and how they refine the food into like the best that you can get out of one simple, for example, tomato or something. It's just truly fascinating to hear and read about them, because as I understood, they say that the 99% of the creative process is the ordered, structured way of working. It's hard work, it's everything that you have learned, etc. But the 1% left is chaos and creativity and fun, and that's, that was completing the 100%.
That is a really good analogy with food, because you're addressing the sort of unique qualities of each, flavor, each piece of
and
raw
really reducing it
material. And then you develop and optimizing, flavors and challenges that sort of arise from the material itself. I guess perhaps that would be maybe the most sort of romantic way of talking about creativity in relation to the architect's profession, but I'd say that clients don't really buy creativity. What they that is sort of delivered by someone else. I think what they really buy is the to engage someone to help deliver their own creativity. I would
really?
also.
I don't go to the dentist to give him the solution. He's the pro, he's the expert, he does the job. Surely if I go to an architect, you come up with the ideas, you problem solve that reception desk at the Ernst & Young. The client probably doesn't even know there's a problem with the reception desk. Because he didn't see the problem,
Well, from the analogy of the chef to the analogy of the dentist, I wouldn't really myself go to a sort of creative dentist. I would like them to be pretty much in the routines. But, addressing my particular situation. So
I wasn't suggesting that Dennis was necessarily creative, but he's the pro. He's the expert, and you go to him for expert advice. I go to an architect for expert advice, and part of that is realizing the vision. Maybe that's the difference, realization.
I think it was Frank Lloyd Wright who said, "I do not know why you hire an architect and then tell them what to do."
Yeah.
I love that quote. Yeah.
But it's like, you know, allowing someone else into the process and also trying to maintain an interdisciplinary situation. Also, the users, representatives of the clients, when a project has representatives from all these parties, I think they reach much, much further than a project where these sort of experts gather around the table and then sort of lay out the lines. It worked for Frank Lloyd Wright, but I don't know. Hey, no, it's crumbling.
I mean, of course, we have to listen. And working on the Google office in Stockholm, I mean, they were very clear about their process, that involving the end user is like, it is in the DNA of Google. And I think we learned a lot from that. And I mean, we are Swedish, so I think we listen a lot. We're not really the...
but the end user of Google is me at the end of a computer.
Well,
how did that influence their design?
The people that sit
yes
in the
and
office.
no. In that sense, the end user was the people working in the office. Okay. They were involved in the whole
employees.
Design process in a way that we almost, you know, felt that where is this process going? But it was a very interesting experience and
so you were relying on their creativity. So instead of having the 700 people or the design reviews, you were talking with the Google employees saying, we don't want a carpet there, we want a skateboard there. So
it was a lot like that. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's you know, I think it's Ilse was talking earlier about the creative process being about conversation, about, you know, discussion, etc. And I think that discussion needs to extend to the client and actually also later on to the people who execute the project, because, you know, ultimately we can only, you know, be as good as the people who build what we design. And, you know, I think that communication, that discussion needs to go through all of the levels to end up at the best project. She was talking about, you know, starting early, working with architects as an interior designer, you know, working with the client to make sure that you address what they want to do. And in many ways you're not looking for the client to design what you're working on, but to give you kind of clues as to how they might use it, what they might like or not, you know, what they engage with, etc., and develop your creative solutions out of that.
And I think it's a responsibility. I mean, it's not us who, if we, for example, do an office, we will not work there. It's the client. So of course we have to listen carefully. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the simplest way to do anything is to do the same thing as you did yesterday.
Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
But
so it's that you
that doesn't
work
sound terribly creative, does it?
Yeah, exactly. So that's somehow the sort of definition of that's where creativity comes in, and it can come from the client side, putting a sort of creative question: how do we want to work? And suddenly the sort of work culture or the way Google is set up now is some kind of a merry-go-round office. You know, nothing looks like an office, but it's even that kind of extreme situation, this sort of playground office architecture, even that will be yesterday's news. And I don't think what will succeed it. Maybe something that sort of addresses our pretty stressful environment. We are sort of torn between a communicative scale of me and my screen, and me and the three of you, me and the bigger room. So I think perhaps the sort of office after the merry-go-round office, if I may call the Google setup, that we don't know, but it might be something that is you know, most likely completely different and a lot less stressful. I wouldn't know. Okay,
well, listen, that's, I think we've got into a little bit there the idea of creativity and how that's made. Let's talk about one of the other topics I mentioned about this dilemma, this dichotomy between having a house style and always offering something new, which is what I always get from all the designers I speak to. Oh, no, we don't have a house style. Johanna, you're smiling a lot at that. How do you guys go around? What do you have a house style? What do you call it? Or is every single thing?
I think I'll give you the same answer that you've already gotten then, that we don't have a house style. But we got a task quite recently doing a design for an office without a client. Make a package of an office made by Tengboms, what would it look like? And we did workshops within the office. And
who was the client there? I mean, no occupier necessarily.
It's a new service, so people interested in buying an office could contact this company and said that I would like this package of office design from Tengboms or from TIA or from Front and Studio Stockholm. We have 4 architect offices being asked the same question. And we had to do the homework about who are we, what does an office from Tengboms look like without a client. And then we got this new tradition.
Is this a modular system? I don't really understand it. Could you explain that more?
It's an idea from Senab.
Who are they?
They sell furniture, and they had this idea about when you buy a car, for instance, you can get a classic, or you can get a modern, or you can get all sorts of packages around the car.
So within the BMW framework, I can buy the leather or the wood or the vinyl or whatever I want to pay for.
And what they are seeing is that a lot of clients out there, they want to hire an architect, but they don't really know how to find the architect, or the architect is too expensive, or it's too big firm. And this is a way of getting a range of furniture looked through by an architect office, colors, furniture, design put together, so you can actually go there and buy a conference room by Tengboms. Already equipped and
well, that sounds like quite a creative way of doing things, and that's come from the manufacturer effectively asking you to do something.
And we were a bit puzzled because we thought, is this a good idea for us? Because what's the need of the architect when the architect have already left the package? But instead of getting paid for our work in a normal way, we get like you do with furniture, so it's a royalty-based. And we thought this is a new idea of selling the idea of a room or a space. So it's just been launched last week, and it's called Architection.
Architection, there you go. I would say that house style, Conran probably has something of a house style. If you look at the Burns Hotel here, Das Trieste, just to look at 2 hotels that he's done over the course of some different years, there are defining elements.
Well, I mean, we call it a house sensitivity, I guess, or sensibility, which is definitely there, and I think that's undeniable. Terence has a long time ago written a book called Plain, Simple and Useful, and I think that's been one of the kind of driving factors for us. We're not into over-decoration, we're not into, lots of gold tabs, etc. Even though we do gold tabs these days, but it's about a sensibility of how we approach a project, and as a result of that, the result or the end design may look different, but I think there is a kind of a certain underlying understanding of how materials are used, a certain kind of simplicity, a kind of certain, I guess, kind of underlying modernist approach to design that is recognizable, even though not every project looks the same. Okay.
What about white?
No house style, but
there's a surprise.
There's your answer, yet again. But a house agenda, I'd say, of bringing sustainability back into the architect's sort of side of the field. So
sustainability.
Yeah, and particularly when it comes to interior design, I'm not really sure that anybody has cracked the code of certifiability in interior design. I guess.
And is that a defining factor then within white architecture? If I want sustainable design, I'm going to go to you as opposed to Tengboms?
I guess, of course, the expertise will be in both Tengboms and Conran. What we do is really to, in all scales, look for the sustainable solution. If there is none, you have to approximate. You have to get as close as you can to kind of life cycle analysis. And in the field of interior design, you just have to acknowledge that it is a different time frame operating. There will be wear and tear on the surfaces. There will be a need to replace stuff, like carpets, work chairs, and the furniture. So that kind of cycle, with a sort of faster pace, will. But it really demands a more conscious, sustainable agenda. And if it's not in the products, you need to somehow get the environment together as a holistic solution.
So, I mean, I think if I'm right, sort of the house style is the incorporation of sustainability, which I don't see as terribly much of a differentiator. Everybody's doing stuff that's sustainable, or should be.
Well, it might not be reflected in the actual aesthetics. I mean, of course, the aesthetic choices would not be to the expense of the sustainable agenda and vice versa. So it's not in the style, it's in the thinking and also in the relationship that you establish with your client. That this is an agreement. We will not go for less than a sustainable agenda within the office.
But isn't it a bit like sort of Apple products all coming out in white, and previously, you know, everything had been grey or other colours, black and Weimar grey, I remember it being called, for the Braun products and what have you. And then Apple came out with stuff that's white. Isn't that the sort of the whole? There's a design paradigm that sort of sits there and they set that agenda. I mean, is white setting an agenda of a particular style?
So you mean neutrality for the sake of a longer lifespan, more sort of acceptance over time? I'm not really sure.
I'm just trying to think about sort of how you know, what's the baseline you're working from, and how do you make it different off that baseline? How did Conran do something different from what they did last time? How do you do that? You tell me it's the same, and there's the.
Well, it's actually nowadays it's so tricky, and you will all know this. You look online, you know, you've got Instagram, you've got all of those different programs, and we've got our young designers in particular are always on the net finding new images and whatever. So how do you get away from A, doing the same thing all over again, but B, also just copying what you see online?
Worst,
which is worse, and
losing your identity.
That's a really tricky one to do today, because everything's been done before. Yeah. Really, nothing is completely original. So it's about taking all the influences and trying to extract from that something that is new just by the way it's maybe put together, maybe the materials of it, maybe the way it's used or the way it's placed in a room or whatever. I think nobody can claim anymore this is completely new and original. There's very, very few things that are new and original. They're probably mostly technological, actually. But in terms of design...
Or new materials.
Or materials, that's right. But in terms of design and the way things look aesthetically, which is what people come to us for, I think that line is very, very fine between kind of doing something original, shall we call it, rather than new, and something that makes that project unique for itself, even though obviously the influences come from all sorts of other different places.
But it is a tricky question. I mean, we did a restaurant a couple of years ago called the Boccheria. I see the architect over there. And I think when you do something which is very appreciated, people come and ask, couldn't you make us another Boccheria?
I want one of those, yeah.
Yeah, and of course you can't, because it would be...
Well, you'd love to. You'd love to do what you did yesterday, because it's easy.
Yeah, but
it's boring though as well.
It would be boring. You do
the
same thing over and over again.
It's much easier to make money out of it, because you're just doing the same thing you did before, but you can't because... No. Or can you? I mean, does the client specify in his contracts, no one else has allowed that design? And
you have to understand that the design is not it's not a product by itself. In that case, it was a combination of the food, the menu, about the client, about their dreams and their ambitions, and it's the next day it's another client and another brief, and so.
But if you want something in the spirit of the Boccheria, then you can sort of
in the spirit of nice,
then you would
word.
sort of lean back on your methodology, perhaps.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a process, of how you start with some base tenants ideas and then develop those. We always, when we're designing X, Y, and Z, we always use stone, because stone is for whatever reason.
So I guess what people come back to white for in terms of another office and so on, that would be for the activity-based design that worked well for a certain group, particular kind of work situation. In terms of healthcare projects, there is evidence-based design where you actually look at the performativity of spaces and the implementation of design and how to track that. Does it really work? How can we anticipate the performance of design in that particular environment? So the methodology, I hope you come for the for the post a name perhaps, but you stay for the methodology. I don't know.
For the way white works, the way Tengboms, the way Conran works. We did start a little bit late, so we will overrun, but we're about got 10 or so minutes to go. We've still got a lot to get through. But are there any questions now from anybody? We have a microphone, or if anything comes to your mind in the next few minutes, please just put your hand up and we'll get the microphone to you. I'd like to now move on to other ideas about investing in creativity. How do you do that? What are the things that you're doing? Johanna, tell us a little bit about.
Well, I think we talked about it a little bit already. That the project reviews that we do, we have a series of lectures that we do every month.
Internal lectures, or
we have internal, and then there's an external. So. Every third month we have external, and we've also tried to mix.
Give us an example of some of the externals. I mean, so might you give a presentation about a project you just did?
Yeah, or how we work, or what we learned from a project. And since we have another 10 offices in Sweden, we also try to travel in between the offices.
Share the knowledge.
And one of the most spectacular office buildings we did in Helsingborg, which is a very small city in Sweden, and they did LEED certified building, which is the third most environmental building in the world. And we have so much to learn from our colleagues in Helsingborg.
Okay, and give us an example of some of the external people you had. I mean, have you had a chef, a restaurateur come and talk to you?
No, we haven't. But when we did the pitch for Google, one of my colleagues was a chef, so we put that on the CV as well. So to understand that you get more than an architect.
Okay, should you have a chef coming to talk to your people?
Maybe we should. I'm getting very much interested in the food industry.
Why is that?
So maybe we should.
Maybe you didn't have any lunch before this session. There you go, you're
I'm good at eating, not very good at cooking it. My husband is here, so he knows it.
Anybody else like to talk about how you nurture talent, how you invest in it?
I think a lot of it is about time, because obviously, as designers, the one commodity that we sell is our time, really. And investing time in mentoring and teaching and training young designers, that is really the best way of doing that. But obviously it takes the time of the more senior people in order to mentor people, give them time to allow them to learn things, to talk things through, to explain why things should be done a certain way.
Did Conran have time for you?
Very much so, yeah. I mean, Terence loved nothing more than, sitting down with the design team, with me or other people or whatever, and just talking through what we're proposing, kind of asking why we're doing things. Importantly also asking how things might wear and how they might, last in 5 years, 10 years time or something like that. And just kind of getting you thinking also about the more practical aspects of design, which I think are equally as important, and kind of thinking about how you can still be creative within those confines of being more practical, because that really is what good design is all about.
I said creativity being problem solving.
Yeah.
What about time, and different sorts of time? How does that work in white architecture's nurturing of talent?
Yeah, the time, as Ilse Crawford also pointed out, I mean, architecture is time management somehow. We sort of assign, invest in qualities and material and so on. The biggest asset is of course the architects, like each and everyone, and good recruitments, people having spent time on in their own education, and also continuously look out and have a good eye out on society and what's happening. But I mean, closest at hand for me is to say that our way of nurturing creativity is to the big investments that are done from white architects to into research. That is a big legacy of investing in research, both fundings that could be where you could apply from externally. There's also the internal funding for the faster and longer research projects carried out with close at hand, close to practice, close to the projects.
And you're very good at traveling. We envy them. They go to all sorts of study trips.
Oh, the study trips.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes that's where we get a lot of good people sort of coming to White, come for the.
Because where do you go for your study trips?
Very generous agenda. We went to Brooklyn and all around New York to see to get to know the challenges obviously in the traces of the storm, Sandy, and city planning at the very edge of urban sort of challenges today. So it's a big it's a big thing to send people of 700 people to Berlin and New York during 1 year.
I can imagine. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's very well invested, you know.
So on the one hand, you're bringing, for example, external speakers in to give you further ideas and to help nurture the talent and creativity. And on the other hand, going on study trips, as you say. I mean, are you doing that sort of thing as a group, or is it more individual, ad hoc?
It's probably more kind of related to projects, etc. You know, that it might be a research. You know, if we do a project in a particular place. But I think it's also just encouraging and giving people time to go and see things, and it doesn't have to be abroad. It's, you know, great lectures, exhibitions, new buildings, new restaurants, and whatever. We always kind of
trade shows,
you know, all of that kind of stuff. Encouraging people to go and see things. It's very difficult to be creative when you sit at your desk looking at your computer, even if you have Instagram and all of those kind of things. But, you know, being able to go out there and actually see things, touch things, and see what works and doesn't work is really important. And, you know, we're quite happy for people to say, actually, we'd like to go to this trade show. Can I go in the afternoon, or, you know, can I take some time off to do that? We're very happy to do that if we feel that it's useful and it'll help them develop on. But I think it's nurturing the curiosity of wanting to go and see things as well. You know.
Yep. Any questions from you guys? We're going to probably head on to the last topic now. So if there's any questions so far, or other ideas you'd like to sort of throw into the mix, please do so. I'd just like now to talk really about this idea of having the owner's name above the door, and how you've had to deal with this, obviously not in your lifetime, so to speak, but as and perhaps what also is happening right now in the world of Conran.
Yeah.
Tengboms, there is no. Well, tell us.
Yeah. I think being such a big office and the founder is dead, I don't think it's such a big problem, really. I think people can advance and get their names out. Do
people come in, clients come in sort of saying, I want to speak to Mr. Tengboms, I'm not interested?
No, they don't.
Then no, he's not around anymore.
No.
I find that quite interesting, because I would have thought most people would go, okay, I want to speak to the boss.
No, not at our place, but I'm sure that could be, or I know that's the fact in other offices. But maybe if it's a smaller office and the founder is still active, I'm sure that they would like to work with that person.
Well, let's ask Tina. 80 odd people, 60, 70 people, something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean,
what happens?
Obviously, you know, when you have someone as iconic as Terence Conran with his name above the door, it is a you know, it's a blessing and it's a curse at the same time in many ways. And I guess from the beginning, Terence is not an interior designer or an architect; he's a furniture designer. So it's always been about working within a team and having creative people coming in working with him from the very beginning, because those are not his specialities. And he actually started off as an urban design practice, which is definitely not his speciality. But he had a belief that, you know, as a designer, you can kind of put your hand on many things and you know, work through the problems when you bring in the right people to work with you. So Terence is 83, and I think people acknowledge the fact that obviously as an 83-year-old you're not as active anymore as you used to be. He is still on our board as a non-executive director, but he's over the last couple of years stepped back from kind of day-to-day running of the practice, and his son Jasper has taken over as our chairman. He is a fashion designer, as you may well know, so obviously his involvement in the practice is very different to his father's. It's much more on a kind of overseeing on a more strategic level, but it means it's still a family firm. It's still a family company, and our board consists mainly of the Conran family, and that's very different to it being, you know, a board of directors or such like. So it's very personal as a result, and it's still very much about how do we protect the Conran name without it being all about Terence, but it being about actually the people that have worked with him for many, many years, and giving them a voice and making sure that people know that they are actually the people who've been producing the creativity in the business for many, many years.
Okay.
I wonder if you would ask the same question to, you know, other businesses like Merrill Lynch or Johnson & Johnson and so on. I think, you know, at some point it will just be, you know, a rose will be a rose by any other name. So
I agree. It would have been a nice question to ask Gert, for example, who's still here, and it is his company, and it is his name on the door.
I'm really curious about, to know how many people actually do think white is the color white, when when you introduce yourselves, and
so easily could be, couldn't
globally,
it? Yeah.
Where it's not. So there is a legacy, and it is perhaps more important to sort of lean back on the legacy under the name, the big name, like internally inside the practice, rather than from the outside. Building a brand that could be from any name.
And I think it's also about size, because when you look at a practice that might be kind of 10 people or so, and there is a name above the door, it is that person's practice. They can be involved in every decision. They can be the person who actually calls the shots on everything creative that comes through the door. When you get bigger than that, that's not possible. And I think everybody will know that at Foster and Partners, it's not Norman Foster making every creative decision. He can't. There's however many hundred people working for him. So I think it's that acknowledgement also that when you're talking about a slightly more sizable practice, once you get over 20, 30 people or whatever, it's just not possible that one person can call all the shots.
I guess also we have an elephant in the room, because Gertvin would be sitting here. I'm now sort of graciously representing him. I mean, he would be able maybe to answer the question.
So it's a shame we don't have him.
Yeah. And then within the in terms of practice, I think we all have an idea of how they operate. That there will actually be some kind of final word that stays with him. But I can't. I mean, obviously, I can't sort of answer for him. But that could also be some kind of model for how an office works. It's not the case where for white architects.
No, I understand. I think
too many talents on the roof for that.
We're pretty much out of time now. So if there are any questions, I will ask you to put your hand up now. And if not, I'd ask you please to thank my panelists very much. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies, thank you.